ask you something, and I wanted you to clear up something for me, because there's a lot of, we have this little group that I started on Facebook called Protect Yourself from Predatory Film Distributors and Aggregators, which started off as a distributor Facebook group. And now it's become like this hub of the latest distribution techniques, who's screwing who, asking questions about, certain distributors or sales reps and things like that. And people just, it's a wealth of information. I want you to clarify, and I'm not going to use the distributor's name, and when the second I give you the description, you probably will know who it is, but I'm not going to say it. But if a distributor is putting out 40 to 50 movies a month, how much attention is going to each release? And they might be a very, very grandiose distribution company, have, this perceived value for independent filmmakers. And they're like, hey, I'm with X company now. Look at that. I have arrived. But yet you'll get $0 ever from that situation in many cases. What's your opinion of that scenario? And there's a handful of those companies out there that they just pump them out, and they're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks, essentially.
Well, that was what I was going to say. It really comes down to that, right? At the beginning, let's say they sign up 10 films, right? In a given period of time, in the next 30 days, they sign up 10. So that means they're finding, these people that we've been talking about, filmmakers who have worked hard, who have presumably, in most cases, completed their film, sometimes not, but. And they have to sign this agreement. Well, you and I have talked about this. Those agreements can be 15-year commitments. They tend to be 5, 7, or 10 years.
Oh, no, I've seen them up to 25 now. They're getting so predatory, it's going up to 25.
So now, because they want to lock the filmmaker in, like literally forever, right? So that they can't go somewhere else. And the truth is, even if they don't do anything with the film, the filmmaker can't take it and go someplace else with it. So they're essentially being held hostage. So now they sign these 10 agreements. And let's say, just to use that round number, let's say that every one of those agreements requires a $100,000 marketing fee. That people should understand comes from the sales, right? It's not an upfront. We don't have to write them a check for $100,000, but the first $100,000 in sales that's generated, we are agreeing that they're going to get to keep as their quote unquote marketing fee, right? And that marketing fee, when it's legit, is fine, because what it says to me as a filmmaker is, okay, there's 9 other people here I'm sharing the pot with. And so does that mean that when they go out and do the front and the back page ad of the Variety and the Hollywood Reporter throughout all of AFN for that entire sweep, that my poster is going to be on there, or they're going to be looping my film on the screen? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means, but I'm paying the same as everybody else, right? So now, in this scenario, this company, who shall remain nameless, is going to sell the shit out of that film until they hit the $100,000 mark, right? Because that's their money. So now they have just brought in $1 million on 10 films, right? Off of the backs of the filmmaker and their investors. But then hit that plateau, and I've seen this happen to me, by the way. Once they hit the plateau, their commission goes from that 100% of revenue down to 20, because that's their commission. So now they're only, and if they do make a sale after that, that remaining 80% becomes my filmmaker, my first money in, right? But now they've lost interest, and they kick the thing to the curb. However, out of those 10 films, 2 of them might be performing like gangbusters. And the other ones are just kind of mediocre. But 1 or 2 of them might be just taking the lead without question and for sure hit. Those are the ones they're going to focus on. They're going to move the other 8 aside. They're going to take those films and they're going to really push until they can squeeze every dollar out of it, even at 20% now. It's worth their while. And then next month, they're going to go find 10 more filmmakers. And by the way, while we're all trying to figure out where we're going to get the money to go to Cannes, those are sitting on a yacht popping my way. $100,000 marketing fee off of my movie that I can't afford to go see at the festival.
Now, I wanted to bring back something. That's why I love having you on the show, because we speak the same language. That scenario that you talked about, the print ad in Variety during AFM. Now, let's say on that print ad they have 20 posters, okay, and that ad cost $20,000, let's say, right, for that week on Variety. Is it fair to say, because I've seen this happen, is it fair to say that they're not going to cut up that 20,000 or prorate that 20,000 per 20? They're not going to charge each filmmaker $1,000. In the accounting, they'll charge each filmmaker $20,000 for an ad. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. I've never seen that. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah,
isn't that Hollywood accounting?
Well, yeah, but that's where it all goes wrong, and that's what I'm trying
Correct.
to say.
It's abuse.
Look, Alex, I have gone to the extent, because, first of all, your listeners should understand that in these agreements, the filmmaker has the right to an audit, right, once a year at their own expense. So if you wanted to, you could go to this company after the deal's done and everything's happening, and you have the right to go in and audit the books and take a look at what the scenario actually is, how much is being spent on what and whatnot. And so if that were the case, you would see what you just described. That said, you wouldn't know that it wasn't $20,000 because in your mind, you're thinking, I was on the cover of Variety, or I was on the back cover of Variety. And it might make sense to a first or second time filmmaker that it would cost $20,000 to do that. When you're right, they just made $150,000, $200,000 off of a $20,000 ad. The problem is, number one, nobody ever goes in for that audit. Nobody ever follows up on it because they forget that it.
If it's even on the contract.
In there, right. But assuming that it is, number one, God, I hate to say this, but it's only because I've actually experienced this that I'm speaking this way. But number one, it's incumbent upon the filmmaker to initiate that process. Number two, it's like the IRS audit. It's like, oh, sorry, got to go to lunch. Can you come back next Tuesday? Right? So actually trying to find the time to get them to commit to letting you come in there to audit their books on your movie, good luck. Forget about it. Right? And then, even if that happens, what guarantee do we have? And I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
Oh, you mean that there's a second set of books, sir? No.
Yes.
No, stop it. You mean like mob style? Like mob style?
Like, here you go. Take a good look. Yeah, it's just, and this is why I've been saying for all these years that it's going to
implode,
bite them all. It's going to come back. This is not sustainable. It can't be. It can't be. It's no longer acceptable. The other thing I think that's playing into this, when I first started, independent filmmakers were a joke. We were considered a joke. We weren't ever taken seriously. And it was so easy for them to toss us aside. Like we were just a bunch of freaks, until we started winning Best Picture every year.
Right.
Right?
This year, even this year, Jesus, a foreign film for the first time.
Including this year. So for like 7 out of the last 8 years, it's been an independent film, right? You're not seeing these big tentpole blockbuster films winning Best Picture. We're making those movies. We are making those movies. We might be distributing them through the studio system for exposure's purpose, but we're the ones who are making those movies. We, the independent film community. So it became clear at some point that we, as a community, are now a force to be reckoned with, and you can't treat us the way you used to treat us back in 15 years ago when I got started. So, but the irony is that although a lot of the components of the industry have shifted and improved for us as independent filmmakers as we've progressed, that one thing is just never changed. That distribution model of ripping off filmmakers doesn't change. And that's the reason why people are hungry for a distributor, right? To try to find an alternative to that. They're trying to find a way to self-distribute their films. And that's why people are, doing it on Facebook and on whatever they can. They're looking for any means other than the traditional. because that gap is starting to close.
Right. And the thing is, unfortunately, if you have a $500,000 or $1 million film, self-distribution can happen, but man, you've got to be hitting it at every cylinder has to hit perfectly. You got to know exactly what you're doing. So that's why I keep saying, if you're going to go down that road, keep the cost as low as humanly possible. So you can get the ROI, so you can get into the black faster. You know, a $15,000 indie, which could be excellent, is going to have a lot better chance than a $150,000 indie to generate money back. Because both you and I know how difficult it is to get eyeballs, to get people to look at your films. It's just an insane system. It's like going back in the olden days, like how many, I call it, and I've said this publicly and I many times, I feel what happened in the Me Too movement, which was, it was something that was a standard way of doing business in Hollywood, like the casting couch. The casting couch was a thing from back in Chaplin's day. Everybody, oh yeah, I got to go on the casting couch to get that part, all of that, right? And Me Too kind of exploded that situation, and all for the better, of course. I feel that what's happened to filmmakers over the course of that same time, and even more so now, is a financial kind of raping. Because you put up $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of your own money, or your mom's parents, or whatever, or investors' money, and they're literally just stealing it from you, stealing it legally. It's insane. So I think you're right. There is an absolute reckoning coming, and I think that the system can't keep going. I think it was easier in the 80s, in the 90s, and even in the early 2000s because the volume was a lot different. The distribution outlets were a lot different. But now, because of so much, this system can't hold. That's why it stayed like that for 80, 90 years. Yeah. Because it was pretty much locked. But now it's the Wild Wild West, and they can't handle it anymore. They don't even know how to deal with it. So they're trying to. They're trying to use the horse and buggy on a Ferrari, no pun intended, and it doesn't, the whip on like trying to make the car go with the horse and whip. I'm like, no, dude, that's a car. It has an engine. It runs on gas. It's not a horse. Do you agree?
100%, 100%. And the other aspect of this that's already rearing its ugly head is on the investor side. With what happened in the stock market just in the last week or two, when they say investors, when they talk about the stock market, it's in every other aspect. And so we essentially are experiencing right now a freeze on investment. The last thing somebody wants to do is talk to me right now at this moment about putting up $1 million on a movie.
Right. It's getting tougher for you.
Well, for everybody, because they're just trying to find a way to protect the money that they have, and, in some ways it may be a good way to divert the funds and put it into something, that has the potential to really grow. But this goes back to what we're talking about the whole time, is that one of the issues we have, even with the investors that I deal with on a regular basis, is that these guys hear these horror stories. They know what's going on. And so what happens is I now find myself in a position where an investor might say to me, listen, I'll put up the money for this movie, but I want a distribution deal up front. I want you to sign a distribution deal. And my response to that usually is, that's a bad idea. Because it is. Because I understand, Mr. Investor, that this would give you a sense of security because you got this person's brand name attached to your film as a distributor. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, as an experienced filmmaker with 24 whatever films under my belt, I can tell you emphatically that we are going to be better off if you just put the money up and trust us to do our job and make a really great film. And then let us go out there and compete in the marketplace. Let us go to the film festivals. Let us let's get us a bunch of distributors vying for our project. Let's not sell our soul to the devil today just so that you can feel a little bit more secure. Because in my opinion, you have a way better chance of not only making your money back, but making a much higher upside if you let us go make a great movie and go out and compete with it, than if you lock us into some 7 or 15-year deal with some schmuck who's never going to move, and we're going to end up making this great movie, and we can't even do anything with it because we already sold our soul to the devil over what? Over your lack of security?
Your insecurity, absolutely.
It doesn't make any sense. So that's a conversation I often have to have with investors, and it's a tough conversation to have because you're literally saying to them, let me take the security away from you and trust me to do what we do. And in the long run, we believe that we'll be better for it.
But it's just a perceived security. It's not really security. It's not like you're signing with Disney or Warner's and they're giving you a massive upfront fee that's covering your budget. That's not the case here. Right. You're basically just doing it. You're just signing it up like anybody else. And then maybe if you're lucky, they give you a minimum guarantee of a quarter of the budget, and that's like amazing if they did that. But that's not happening.
It's not happening.
I was talking to a filmmaker I was talking to a filmmaker at AFM. And they were telling me like, hey, I made a movie for $150,000. They were from I think South Africa or Australia as well, one of those two. And it's like we made $150,000 film. I'm like, and we got an MG. I'm like, oh great. What who did you sign with? And they told me the company. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Because when I heard MG, I'm like, who gets an MG in today's world? Like for an independent film, how much did they do? And he's like, oh, they gave us 30. And I go 30. Okay. Is that for a certain territory? He goes, no, we gave him worldwide. And I'm like, so you got $30,000 for a product that you paid $150,000 for, and you locked up your film for 7 years? And he was just so happy that he got $30,000. I go, what other business in the world do you spend $150,000 to make $30,000? Like that doesn't. It makes no sense. But for filmmakers, we're like, happy. Right. And he's like, no, but my film's going to get out there. I'm like, dude. And I mean, I think he walked away a little deflated after he spoke to me. I'm like, do you realize what you just did? Like if you're selling off one right or one territory for 30,000 and you still can keep going, great. But you sold your soul for 30 grand.
Yeah.
You're never going to make your money back. It's insane.